Good evening and welcome to Slam the Gavel, the show that tells it all regarding family court, other court issues, as well as CPS. I am your host, Marianne Petrie. You can find me, my books, and blogs on dismantlingfamilycourtcorruption.com, as well as on Amazon, and my books are also on audio. Now, I've got a brand new guest on. I'm happy to have Monica Ciardi on. She was recently released from Essex County Prison the end of March, and she had served 5 months in between Morris County from November to December to Essex County Jail from January to March. Now, she served a year in about three different jails for an alleged crime of speech related, I would even say First Amendment issues. And apparently anything can fall under harassment. And I totally welcome you, Monica Ciardi. How are you even today?
Hi, Marianne. Thanks for having me. I'm a little nervous. I'm, not a fan favorite in my state here of New Jersey. Yeah, I'm still not really back on my feet. It's only been about a month. Um, I had previously never been incarcerated for more than around 30 days at a time. So 5 months was it was life altering. I would say it's really different than 30 days or 10 days or 2 days. um what when you said that anything can be construed as harassment, I just wanted to clarify that that's in the context of when someone has a restraining order against you. So then it's just anything can, if they say that you're harassing them, um and the way that the justice system is set up here in our country, once you get rearrested, then your score there they have like it's called a PSA score. It gets elevated, and you become like flagged, like with the FBI, like there's something wrong, because you just keep getting arrested. And I mean, I was incarcerated with people who were there for murder one, who had scores of 1 and 2, and mine were 5 and 6. So, it was all really orchestrated,
Mhm.
sort of. So at this point, any time they would arrest me, that would be deemed, you know, I would be high risk for, all, because they arrested me 11 times in total since, um, in about 2.5 years. It's a lot.
So when you were in there, did they keep you separate from the, we'll say, murderers, the more violent criminals?
Um, no, they didn't. No. They tried to put me in a room with somebody. That did not work out at all. So then they sent like investigators from the state, and but in general, I had a special classification. So for 3 months, I don't come out with anybody, so there's like no socialization. So it's basically like solitary confinement, except there's like a glass window, that you can try to scream out, to
Mhm.
somebody else. But there's, some days I would only get, some weeks I would only get out once every 3 days just for a shower. It was really, the conditions are really the violation of human rights.
Oh, I agree. Even when I was in there, medications aren't given to you, and even the food is disgusting. And we have to also remember there are innocent people in there as well.
Right? But they don't really apply the presumption of innocence.
No.
It was also difficult for me. Well, it was a little bit difficult even in Morris, but when they switched me to Essex, which in New Jersey, it is the fourth largest jail in America. Um, so there are active drugs and gangs and shanks, and it's really quite dangerous. And when they transferred me there, I did have a very difficult time the first time, and to some extent again, because the other inmates didn't believe that I was incarcerated.
Hmm.
I was an informant. So because they didn't believe, they didn't, because it's urban, and it's, they're almost all of them that I knew, although it turned out that they are actually really lovely people. Yeah, I mean, who, I don't know, didn't maybe have great opportunities in life and made bad choices, but you know, nobody was in there for speech. I'll just say that.
Right.
Nobody was in there for anything sort of minor, not even remotely. So,
Right. When I was in there, I felt it should have been run as a drug rehab unit instead of wasting taxpayer dollars on a lot of these cases.
it's awful. And then there's some in there that are really just mentally completely gone and belong, and, I like literally, they can't even, they just needed medical help. It was just really, awful. I think it's more alarming though that it even happened.
Hmm.
It's sort of impossible to believe that at 48 years old I would turn into some sort of dangerous criminal that has higher scores than a murderer, um, and commit so many crimes that I would have to be detained 11 times in 2.5 years. I don't find it really to be very plausible. It doesn't really pass the smell test. I mean,
Hmm. Well, I know my case was rigged. I can speak to that. But how can, you know, how can a man treat the mother of his children this way? People ask me this. I don't know. I don't have an answer for that.
even listening to all of our stories, right? I mean, I really don't know. I wish I had a good answer myself. It's unfathomable, to be honest. And it's so corrupt. I didn't have an open case with, DCCP. There are no findings against me. There's nothing in existence to suggest, you know, that I am anything other than, a loving, fit mom. Um, it would, he and his lawyer just committed their usual fraud on the court and said I was relinquishing my custody, and that's it. And now I haven't seen them again. There are no findings. There was no trial. My legal rights are not terminated. There was no finding by the state. And none of this was initiated by DCPP. This was the judges. So I think there was a lot of. I wanted to say too, regarding my release. I wanted to thank everybody, before I forget. Um, and I know everybody that it seemed in the community really rallied and you know played a role in whatever way, by either calling or writing or posting, or
Mhm.
everybody did something, it seemed, to try to help. And that kind of unity, it was really, it made me feel a little safer, a little less alone. Like, I know they're out there. I know they're, going to pull for me. There were investigative journalists, wrote a lot of articles.
Yeah.
But I mean, as we know, it's still an epidemic and it's still not being covered mainstream, which is also alarming.
Mhm.
Mainstream media won't really go near it. I don't know how anybody I don't know how anybody could treat anybody like this, that when they haven't. I mean, we've been divorced since 2018. I've been remarried for 7 years. Um, there is no allegation throughout the entirety of our relationship, which is it's 25 years old, that I was ever that my ex was ever a victim of any domestic violence by me.
Mhm.
Um, when he originally applied, well, he applied quite a few times, but he was repeatedly turned down. Um, when he did finally obtain, the TRO that ended up becoming a final,
Mm-hmm.
in the history of domestic violence section, victims usually have, assaults, and arrest dates, things like that. He cited three docket numbers in which he had been um, arrested and charged with domestic violence and assault of me. So that his history of domestic violence was the domestic violence he perpetrated against me.
It's horrifying that these people can flip it back onto the victim. It's that whole Darvo.
The Darvo, which is really, not well known, which confuses people, but it's, deny, attack, reverse, victim, and offender. And I think they call it, I've seen online in a few places, the silver bullet.
Yes.
Right. But, I don't know if it's because, I'm on the spectrum. I had led a very, very sheltered life. I've been a mom for 28 years.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's really all I've been doing. I don't know, but there was no part of me that believed, even proceeding to trial, that I was ever at risk, ever, for 1 second, because I have no history of it, ever, harming anyone. I'm sure people have seen on my Facebook pages, my ex is 6'6". Um, you know, just a very large build, like an ex-football player, so it's sort of ludicrous, the whole thing.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's where the corruption, comes in for sure. Um, there, he violated the restraining order, and I told you he was able to get the one against me in retaliation. But there were videos, time and date stamped, of him, and in the judge's final, violating the restraining order, I should say, with firearms unlawfully. This is no secret. It's been in all the articles.
Mm-hmm.
I have the photos and the videos. And he ended there was a formal stipulation entered into at trial. So
Mm-hmm.
during the trial, only one of us confessed to committing any domestic violence, and it wasn't me. It was him. And contempt of a TRO is one of the 19 crimes. So based on our past, according to the law and everything else, the judge should have had him charged right at that time and granted me a final restraining order.
Mm-hmm.
Instead, she rescinded his own confession and formal stipulation, which had been entered into evidence. She quite literally essentially said he doesn't know what possession is, but he works as a firearms instructor. So again, um, lawyering from the bench, testifying or untestifying for somebody. How can, if both parties have agreed and there's a formal stipulation
Mm-hmm.
where he confessed to it, how can the judge say, well, he didn't really know what possession was? Well, God help us, because like working as a firearms instructor. So,
Right.
and I'll tell you too, which is kind of shocking. I actually felt relief, shock, but also relief, because I knew that it meant, first of all, I knew I would never violate it. So,
Mm-hmm.
I wasn't worried. And I knew that it meant that he would have to stay away from me. So I looked at it from that side, the flip side, that,
Mm-hmm.
okay, well, this is wrong. This is fraud. The court knows it. Everybody knows it. But I mean, at least, which was so naive, I just really had no idea, because, I don't think like that. I don't plan how to ruin someone's life. Um, I mean, this was like long range planning. I mean, really, like I said, he'd been applying, over the years. So, he never amended his TRO to include any domestic violence. And, in the decision, the court notes that he was never formally charged for illegally violating the restraining order with firearms. I mean, I think people have seen that on my page, but why not?
Hmm.
It's a
Hmm.
federal crime. So that's also comes back to, I think, what the investigative journalists were hinting at, that somebody's doing somebody favors because, I mean,
Hmm.
it's sort of hard to get away with federal gun crimes in New Jersey, especially when there's 400 videos in the confession. So,
It seems like evidence doesn't matter in anybody's case.
no, I find that it does not matter. Uh, I don't really know what matters. Money, I suppose. Money matters. I know that, but I don't really, know how, per se. Um, but I think for sure that, I mean, I have been pro se since 2019, because I had to use all the settlement to fight him, because the nonstop, just vexatious litigation, to be honest. And
Hmm.
I don't know how, I don't know. I don't know how,
Well, it seems like when you're even defending yourself and you're answering to their emotions, then they turn around and call you vexatious litigious.
exactly. Well, now there's a gag order on me. I think I made history again. I think I am the only citizen of New Jersey resident, who is barred statewide from every court on every level without approval from the assignment judge. And her order instructs any clerk in any county, which to me speaks right there of corruption.
Hmm.
So the judges are going to just, the clerks like have a special flag, and they're going to just start calling each other. And then the motions are going to be redirected back to the one who put that order in place. And then either she has to approve my filing, or um, someone she designates. And this was also done with no due process. And it's considered a criminal sanction. So legally, I would have had to have representation as well. So, it's, but so now it's just sort of this big, huge mess, right? And then in the middle of this, you know, to get out of jail in New Jersey, once those scores are up, you can fight and you can prove your innocence, but you're going to be detained pre-trial because there's no bail. So that's how everybody, I mean, the girls told me constantly, you have to cop a plea and fight for your case from the street. And ultimately, that is unfortunately what you have to do, because
Hmm.
otherwise you would sit there for, 2 years to get to, trial. I will say, they always try to continue to discredit me,
Hmm.
but like I've said before, a lie never becomes the truth. So they make me plead to, not make me, you can't say that, whatever, right? But the plea is always false reporting. So, which of course is, I just wanted to say about these most recent charges, and then a lot of times they get dismissed.
Hmm.
So, because they know they can't go anywhere, but they just got to brutalize me by putting me in jail. So that's what's happened quite a few times, to be honest. But this last time is really a bitter pill to swallow, because this is regarding, the assault and strangulation that Lila reported.
Hmm.
She reported that to her school. He had been committing custodial interference. So I hadn't seen either of my daughters in 3 months. So I knew nothing about the incident. To those who say I coerced her, or, whatever, I knew nothing. I had no idea that it had happened. It happened on November 11th. And, I remember I didn't know what to do with the custodial interference. I had no access to my kids. And I thought, I'm going to take the orders right to the school. And, so I can um, I went at a time where, I hoped I would run into them, because I was allowed to see my children. I wasn't committing any violations. Um, and that's when I ran into them, and the little one. This was on November 22nd. So that's 11 days after she wrote a detailed report on her school device. And as she says in the video, because she knew it would be reported. So ultimately, I think another mom, Amy Clark Brockwell, told me that she needed to be, examined medically. I had really, no knowledge of medical treatment. I had experience with, strangulation, from my ex, um, but and I think he tried to just use it to scare, but it does. But you're too scared to report. But Lila wasn't, and she did.
Mhm.
Um, and so I did. I took the advice of my friend, and I went online and looked, and they explained how an embolism can be created, and
Mhm.
you can actually pass away weeks after a strangulation incident. So medical care is mandated after any asphyxiation is reported.
Mhm.
Nobody got Lila that medical care. No, nobody. Not the Division of Child and Protective Services, not the school, not the police, not the prosecutors. Nobody. I took her on November 25th because she was complaining of a headache, and she had told me what had happened, and she had they had released her into my custody because she was essentially saying I'm no way going back with him. um, I think in one of the videos you can see he had told her I was dead, so she was you know very shocked to see
Mhm.
me in the first place. But I guess the point I'm trying to get to is she was medically diagnosed as child abuse physical,
Mhm.
with a follow up of cervicalgia, which is an injury to the neck.
Mhm.
The records are littered with the abuse indicators, history of assault from father is right in there. The reason I say that is because that's they charged me with false second degree false reporting of of child abuse to just try to incriminate and harass the victim of domestic violence, which my ex is allegedly. So
Mhm.
the thing that I find really the hardest about these charges is there are medical records by board certified medical doctors, hospitalists, FAAP specialized doctors. There's a team that conferred, and I just don't understand how a prosecutor, which is a lawyer,
Mhm.
or a DCCP caseworker, which is a social worker, can tell me that the medical diagnosis is false. I don't understand how they have the credentials to do that, and that's what
Mhm.
these whole charges hinged on, because they determined because that she had not been strangled. So because of their determination, despite the medical determination, they said that I falsely reported to try to harass him. And they continued with these charges even after they've seen all the medical documents, even after they've seen the videos where the police observed the bruise, that was starting to form on her neck. I've
Mhm.
posted videos of her eyelid drooping,
Mhm.
and pictures of that. And any medical expert would, substantiate, look through the records. There's thousands of pages of records, but there was a finding in 2021 by a child psychologist that evaluated her, that she herself was a victim of his abuse, and she was a victim of child abuse by having witnessed his domestic violence against me, because we
Mhm.
do know that's a legal precedent. If they witness their father, or I guess the reverse, any domestic violence, that's considered child abuse. So
Mhm.
it's all really really corrupt that he even has custody of them.
Mhm.
I mean, extremely corrupt, obviously.
Right. Right. I know when my son reported to the school his episode of domestic violence with his father, The counselor called me. I don't know why she was calling me with my child in the office. And I said, "You guys are mandated reporters. You have to make that phone call.
Right.
He's coming to you for help." So they called, and the end result was CPS said, "Well, everyone has different parenting styles. But if I did that, I would be locked up."
Of course, the targeted parent, and it seems these days it's usually the mother. I
Yeah.
mean, uh, and well, anybody would be locked up for strangling a child
Hmm.
or committing federal firearms crimes, but for some reason he is exempt here in this state from any of those laws. Again, I don't really understand. I know money plays into it because I know I've been in touch with a lot of women, and there are big money cases like the lifestyle was $50,000 a month, all set by him. I had no control over the finances. We had a joint account, and he put into it what he put into it. Not, I had nothing to do with that. But the child support order and was well, it was 12,000 at one point, and then reduced to 8,500 before we got divorced, and then Judge Bogard reduced it to $6 a week, and then when we got transferred to Essex, um, they, even though I haven't seen my children in 2.5 years now, um, they ordered me a year ago to start paying him child support, even though there are tons of outstanding orders ordering him to pay child support. And it's not in dispute that he's a multimillionaire and he exceeds all of the guidelines, and that I have no income and I'm disabled. So the corruption is so extreme. So I know that that judge knows that, who ordered that ridiculous.
Hmm.
Um, and besides that, if I don't have any access to my children, you can't even ask me to pay child support to them. But in any case, they just levied the federal tax return for over
Oh,
six
yeah.
thousand dollars. My new husband's.
Hmm.
So I mean, if that doesn't tell you about corruption, the everybody in this state who reads anything about this case knows he's a multimillionaire. They know I'm, like, struggling, and he's impoverished me. So
Hmm.
the fact that that order got entered, it had to involve fraud, financial fraud, quite simply. How, why would a judge make a determination that all of a sudden, everything should flip when, I haven't worked since 2006. My children are really spaced out. Um, I think it's just a pretty solid piece of evidence that something is really amiss in the courts, that the orders are not based on evidence. To your point, they are not based on the truth. They are not based on reality. There is no impartial jurist, or that would ever order me to pay the multimillionaire um, child support. I think his own case information statement, he said he pays $500 a month for snow removal. And, you know, and I'm ordered to pay $800 a month, even though, again, he exceeds the guidelines, which in New Jersey is around 185,000. So he's over those.
I think this is happening to a lot of people. I know we had talked earlier, and I had told you that despite my signing an injured spouse form with the accountant to protect my current husband's monies, they took out, I believe it was state income tax. It was like $427. I remember that figure. But it's like, how did this happen? How did domestic relations go in there and take that and give it to this vice president of a company?
Right.
Uh,
It's clearly, it's corruption. It could have
right.
happened. It's not. I mean, just sort of like the entry of the restraining order is corruption, because we know he confessed. So, why did the judge simultaneously say that it wasn't in dispute that he did it, and then rescind his confession? And you know, put a final restraining order on me. Um, I will say, I think I remember telling you earlier that I wasn't really worried because I know I've never abused anybody, um, and I never set foot in his house or his car or any like nowhere anywhere near him at all. Drop offs by that point were already just at the police station, and there was just no contact really between us anyway.
Mhm.
But I was arrested for the first time 2 weeks after he got the order, and then it just didn't stop. And then it was then what he would do is go when I wouldn't violate it, because I have all the reports of all the times he went to the prosecutors to try to get a charge and they said no. Then he would go to the judges and get a modification, and like one of the modifications was made behind my back, and it included his three law firms that were working for him, that I was barred from like sending them communications about
Mhm.
hacking or something like it along those lines. Um, and then subsequently, two of his attorneys uh, engaged me, in communications specifically to trigger, when I didn't even know what the amendments were. And so two of the times I was arrested and jailed were based on his attorneys representing that they were victims, of domestic violence. I mean, how, and that one went around to sort of a few different counties. And, you know, you can tell before, in my opinion, the memo gets sent about the case, because the first judge who saw it would be like, what
Mhm.
the, the lawyer, she's pro se, that's her adversary, what the lawyer is a protected party, and they would voice their confusion, but then it would finally find its way to the right judge, who would then um find I had violated it, and
So they did some judge shopping.
yes. And there are police reports that my ex is in direct communication with the Essex County judges. I don't know which one because it's not named. I mean, I have never spoken to any judge except like on the record.
Mhm. Mhm.
And this has been going on since 2015. So, why he is personally speaking to judges as documented in a police report is really, really alarming. I mean,
Oh, yes.
how the heck is he personally communicating with judges? I, I mean, but all of these things, were raised. I, I just think, we talked a little bit. This is like unprecedented.
Hmm.
It's it's like it's a trend. It's a playbook. I don't think my case is any really all that different from anybody else's, except that you know for the 11 times maybe some people are sometimes shocked by that. It's the same PD. That's his local PD every time, naturally, who puts out the charges.
Hmm.
But I mean, whoever heard of mothers being arrested all the time? Whoever heard of us having no contact orders between our children? I mean, this evolution is I think will be remembered in history as a very, very dark time.
Very. And the thing, what people don't understand, like no contact orders, for the people out there that don't understand, a judge will write a no contact order for a parent that says no visiting on holidays, weekends, Mother's Day, which was in my case, or Father's Day, or 4th of July. So I couldn't see the kids on holidays.
Yeah.
It's like, this is crazy. What gives this lunatic the
Yeah.
decision to, and you've got a perfectly functioning, mom or dad, and I was a nurse for 23 years that goes batshit crazy overnight. This makes no sense.
Exactly. Right.
And with your case and my case, it kind of, you co-parented beautifully with your first husband.
Correct. And still have for for 28 years.
So that's a pattern. So why didn't the judge say, look, obviously there's no mental issues if they can co-parent
Well, plus
forever.
they had three different psychiatric and psychological risk assessment and evaluations that were clear that I had no cluster B, psychiatric disorders, uh, primarily trauma, PTSD from the legal abuse and the abuse of my ex and being separated from my children. Um, there is nothing in existence to suggest that I'm an unfit mother. In 28 years, my first husband and I have never one time had DCF involved in my daughter's life ever. Um, we didn't use the courts, you know, for child support or anything. He was
Mhm,
a good human. He still is. I consider him family. My other children call him Uncle, Uncle Sam. Um, yeah, I had no problem co-parenting, and but even if I did, that wouldn't have met any legal criteria whatsoever to remove me, to put a no contact order between me and my children. I mean, it has to be a clear and convincing standard. And so even these felonies that I plead to,
mhm,
um, they have never been used against me for custody reasons.
mhm.
There is no reason in the record, not that I'm unfit or not that, nothing. Just they're just added to the final restraining order now, which actually makes it a crime for me to contact them.
That's so wrong. So wrong. And with these judges, they've got to be aware of the adverse childhood experience scores.
They are, because even the bar, which is quite the corrupt establishment in my opinion, but even if you go on the ABA, there are extensive articles about child removal and just terminating the relationship. And I mean, in jail, the people who were there for homicide and murder and things like that, they still got to visit with their children.
Hmm.
I'm not allowed to speak to my children. And the disturbing thing is once those medical records came back and they made their way to the court, they made the restraints tighter so that I could not continue to produce evidence, all designed, as stated, I think, very well in the articles, to protect the abuser.
Hmm.
And that's what they did at all costs. I mean, it does surprise me the lengths that the entire state is willing to go to, I mean, lying about federal crimes, financial fraud with the IRS. I mean, it's sort of shocking, but
Hmm.
they seem to be bulletproof. So far, I still can't even legally figure out really, what to do about this latest filing injunction. It's and I think they do that on purpose. It's one of their tactics, legal obfuscation. They create such a mess
Hmm.
that it's just very hard, no matter how good you are, to try and get yourself out of it. And people say, oh, you need a really good family attorney. Really? Well, I had seven,
Hmm. Hmm.
of course. Um, I mean, he bifurcated the divorce. So, gave me a settlement of a few $100,000, which I then had to live off of until we got divorced and pay for the litigation. So by the time we got divorced, he had purposely run me, completely through that, got the child support, down to a pittance. Um, I don't think it's really any secret that, I'm sort of targeted here in,
Hmm.
the state. Um, it, I really believed in my right to the First Amendment, and that was my mistake. And that's the truth. I believed I had the right to criticize the judges who created abusive conditions for my children who immediately demonstrated maladaptive responses.
Mm-hmm.
They needed crisis intervention emergently. Uh, they weren't doing well in school. After Lila reported that incident, she became too much of a liability. Now she's in the some psychiatric institution school. But and again, to make sure that the abuser is protected, I'm not able currently to access any of her records, any either of their records, nothing. There were many applications I filed to be able to go to my daughter's 8th grade graduation. My ex did not even file opposition. The judge still ruled against me. Ordinarily, that would be a default. So it's almost like it felt to me like, wow, they're working for him even when he doesn't show up.
Mm-hmm.
Because
Mm-hmm.
he didn't have any problem with the application. He didn't oppose it. So then it should have been granted by default. So things like that are sort of, big, I think, red flags. I
Mm-hmm.
think the worst thing is that I don't know how we're going to get out of this mess.
Oh.
I really don't. I mean, I see brilliant efforts all the time, new, groups formed. I did want to say, because I think it's definitely you know our latest big venture is with Phoenix Kai Rising, and it's ignite, it's light the fire, from ashes to action, and it's essentially a movement that where the intent is to file a mass writ of habeas corpus for the release of our children, at this, at the same time, using the same language, like across the nation. So, I mean, I don't know if, anybody knows about that, but I do encourage moms to get involved, because I mean, if all of these, federal courts, district courts, whatever, whichever court it's going to go to in your state, if they're all filed at the same time, and, we can really make an impact, um, it sends a message. I mean, I don't know. I have spent so many hours, weeks, really months of my life writing legal documents that even the judges lauded. That they were better. My legal briefs are better than lawyers, but an excellent legal argument has really never been a deterrent for criminal activity, has it?
Mm-mm. Mm-mm.
So I'm sort of over the perfect motion, uh, ideal, because I know now it doesn't matter how many times I cite my rights and prove beyond, with indisputably, that, I should have my children. It doesn't matter, because they're just doing whatever they want. So I think it is going to have to be, in order to affect change, a larger, it's going to have to be a statement more. I don't think anybody's going to just file the perfect motion, I should say.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I think
Well, I also think when you're a pro se, they don't take you seriously and they have no respect for you at all.
they definitely really don't. But they also didn't like the record I was making, and that's why. So I think they knew when they took me out of jail this time, based on the backlash, which was very helpful in my opinion.
Mm-hmm.
They knew that probably wasn't going to work out for them going forward, excuse me. So what did they do? They immediately put a filing injunction, unlawfully, in violation of my constitutional rights. Everybody has access to the courts. Prisoners have access to the courts. Monica Ciardi, Monica's got a gatekeeper. I mean, Sherry Eisenpress, I mean, it's
Ugh.
been a nightmare. I mean, I've had women trying to get help with her from 4 and 5 years ago. I mean, that they finally caught up with her, and she's facing RICO charges for the same thing,
Mm-hmm.
order. So, uh, you know, um, really, I think the best option left, aside from movements like, this mass writ habeas corpus, which, is designed to be filed. They're grouping it by states. There's really a lot of help available. there's a Zoom meeting next week at next I think it's next Tuesday at 6 o'clock. People can look up at my Facebook page. I'm part of the group. It's just it has to be something like that. It's not going to be a perfect motion anymore, unfortunately, in my opinion. Arnold Yan has been amazing, getting like all the way up, and you can't believe just the circles they run, and there's just no one to stop them.
Mm-mm. Now, I did see this was on April 29th of 2017. The Women's Coalition, it said a 19-year-old sues family court officials for 250 million for taking away from her mom and giving custody to the father. Defendants include lawyers, social workers, evaluators, guardian ad litems. And that was written in 2017. So I don't know what the update is to that.
Following that too, because that was one of the first big ones. And Maya Kowalski, was
Right.
a big one. But I that's what I had been trying to get to. I feel right now, aside from doing something like what Phoenix Kai Rising, what that group is promoting, um, if I didn't have a gatekeeper order right now, that I have to address, I would sue um, bad actors, whoever they may be, in the civil division with a jury right in the state court, and then that takes away the judge's power because then
Hmm.
it's a jury. So and these people, even the judges, if they were named, and they have to testify about why why would why was it determined that the I mean, if the doctor diagnoses that Lila has a broken arm, is the prosecutor allowed to say she doesn't? I mean,
Well, that suddenly all become medical professionals and psychiatrists.
right. That's we were talking about that earlier about all these evaluations. I find that confusing too because I don't understand how a judge can order medical treatment, and no matter which way you look at it, that's medical treatment.
Hmm.
So that's like practicing medicine. Like I mean, there is nothing in any legislature that confers that authority to an ALJ, no less. These aren't even real judges. I'm sorry, but they're not. It's just one big charade. It's just one big charade. I mean,
Hmm.
we have the right to Article 3 judges. Not, the Chevron overturned. They're
Hmm.
ignoring that. Loper, Bright. There's so many. They just ignore. I mean, it's they definitely don't treat pro se litigants with any respect, but I think there is something going on in their reaction to me based on the level of intensity that they treat me with. I mean, I don't know anybody else who's been arrested 11 times
Hmm.
and flipped the three different counties, and then a gatekeeper order when I have never filed. I filed one civil lawsuit against my ex right before they jailed me. One in 50 years. That's vexatious. I haven't seen my children in 2.5 years. That's vexatious. I mean, so I think they really don't want to hear from me in particular. I have been very verbal, very vocal about their corruption. At one proceeding, I asked the bailiff to arrest the judge.
Hmm.
Um, I know that's a little, hard for some, and I don't. I'm not advising anybody, to do that, but that's the law. When someone commits a felony in plain view, even if it's a judge, no one's above the law. Um, but I think they definitely don't like the things that I say, um, the legal arguments, that I make, and they really really don't want me to be able to make a record of anything. It's really tough.
I think the taxpayer needs to know where their money went when they were jailing you all this time.
Right. And then I was like being rushed to the ER because of my medical issues, and the bills for that were thousands of dollars. and the taxpayers were paying for, all of it. I was arrested this time. They broke into the house. The warrant was listed for the Kansas driver's license. I've never even been there.
Oh,
Nothing, literally nothing matters. They just lock you in there, and then you're just in there. I mean, I know two other mothers that are incarcerated right now. I read a case recently where the judge jailed the mother because she filed and sued him. So he jailed her for contempt. I mean, it is just really dangerous. And I mean, I don't mean, to make it just a gender, issue, but I mean, I'm entitled to, my own sort of feelings about it. And to me, it does seem very much like an attack on women, an
mhm,
attack on, motherhood. We've never seen this. I realize there are some safe, protective fathers who fall victim to,
mhm.
but, in general, this is just, it's an epidemic. Jailed mothers are, it's everywhere. And we're being jailed for trying to have a relationship with our children.
Mhm.
That's what we're being jailed for. I mean, the notion that when Lila reported that, and Lila wrote a police report, and everyone has seen the video, that they were actually able to get me charged with those as second degree felonies is appalling. It,
Mhm.
it's
Mhm.
so clear that those are trumped up charges. The legal standard for that charge, just so you know, that it's if you have any reason to believe that your child was abused, then you can't be charged for false reporting. So not only did I have a reason to believe it, she reported it,
Right.
reported the whole thing. Why wasn't DCPP arrested for going to his house? Why wasn't the school arrested? Why weren't they all charged with harassment?
Mhm.
Why was only I charged and jailed?
Oh.
I mean, it's sort of like, it's shocking. I mean, a million people knew before I did and reported it. So why weren't they all needed to be charged too then, if we all just made this up?
Mhm.
I mean,
Well,
it's unequal protection under the law. It's the violations are endless. They're endless. Um, it's just inconceivable that this is even happening. People are losing their houses. You're finding out the judges are on the titles. It's it's really hard to believe. If
mhm.
you and you know what? That's the sad part. That it hasn't made it out really to the mainstream media on a level. I think, although I think, of course, they must know,
Mhm.
but not where they're really willing to do anything, about it. I mean, I some of these cases are just so horrific. I remember there was another child abuse case in New Jersey about a year ago. Corey, his name was Corey Michiolo.
Mhm.
He passed on the treadmill. Um,
Mhm. Mhm.
and I remember she had applied for a protective order the night before, and it was denied. And the cause of death was um, chronic child abuse.
Mhm.
Not even like a specific, blunt force trauma, or just because he was abused all the time. And that happened here in New Jersey. And there is nothing happens to all of the people who failed. And then they just do it over, So then this incident happened with Lila. There had already been one or two prior. Um, I was put on the judge added the children after that as protected parties on the restraining order, and Lila was hospitalized 6 more times since then. And I
Mhm.
don't even have all the records. I don't even know if she's okay. I haven't, laid eyes on her. Um, uh,
That's so sad.
her sweatshirt. It's one of
Oh.
the things I have left. Um, I don't talk about my older daughter too much. Uh, I respect, her privacy. She's, in high school, and
Mhm.
but I mean, a mother, your children. I feel like I have four hearts, one for each of them. So
Mhm.
it's, and she also doesn't. she doesn't get targeted with the violent abuse that Lila does. It's a different kind,
Right.
not the the violent abuse. So the next thing that I'm really going to be focused on is this mass writ, and then proposing a bill, Lila's law, to there's a few things. I mean, I won't say everything, but um, that the same standard has to apply to report to anybody who reports child abuse. I don't, so if all of us reported it, but I'm the only one who got arrested, then, that's sort of that's
Hmm.
funny. And I think that the Prevention of Domestic Violence Act needs to be amended so that protective parents cannot be jailed for reporting abuse, because
Hmm.
that seems to be one of the biggest problems right now. We
Hmm.
know the statistics. If you report abuse, in 85% of cases, the custody will go to the abuser.
Hmm.
It's like, I think I just heard that again yesterday.
Hmm.
Um, and barring no contact orders between parents and children, without making the legal standard for that so high that it's almost the same as convicting somebody of murder one.
Hmm.
So
Hmm.
those are some of the things that I plan to include in that legislation, which I've been spending a lot of time learning about how to do that, how to draft a bill, how to get sponsorship, all that stuff. It's sort of a lot, but I really think it's really necessary, and it could protect a lot of children and mothers. I think because it seems a lot of mothers are jailed for reporting.
Hmm. I remember when I was in there in that, well, the judge said she was sentencing me to jail, but it said prison on the outside of the building. But I was in the general population. They kept the murderers in a different area. But these poor women, they brought out pictures of their kids, and one of them said, "I haven't seen mine in 3 years," and I broke down and I just went back to my cell. I was like, "Wow," And the guards, these guards are so nasty, right? These female guards are so nasty, and she ordered me out of my cell, and all I said was, "I think I'm going to throw up," and then she left me alone.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
Good for you. I mean,
Ugh.
yes. Again, if anybody had told me at any time in my life this would be the reality at 50, I would have said you're out of your mind. There's no world in which that happens. It's interesting because despite the fact that my first husband and I, we were only married a year, but like I said, we've been friends now for since I was 17.
Mhm.
Close friends. I remember at the time when we met with the mediator that she said the most important thing you can do is make sure that your hands are lily white. She said, never, involve yourself or be anywhere near any sort of, criminal activity. And I was like 22 years old, and I hadn't even been in a bar or, like nothing like that. But
Mhm.
that really sort of stuck with me. And so I did live my life like that. I
Mhm.
mean, almost to an extreme. My ex used to mock me and call me Little Miss Puritanical because I had absolutely nothing to do with anything crooked or I don't drink. I have never even seen illegal drugs or any tried them, nothing. I know it's legal now, but I don't smoke marijuana, nothing at all. And
Mhm.
despite the fact that that is how I chose to live my life and did for
Mhm.
5 decades, the fact that they've just turned this total circus, flipped everything around, and lied. There's a reason why I had absolutely no criminal record, because I made the choice time and again in different situations.
Mhm.
I mean, I was dating, I was discerning because
Mhm.
I remembered what she said. You know what
Mhm.
I mean? And I remember that one guy like smoked pot, And I was like, he was next, because it wasn't legal at the time. And, I, so to be such a stickler, and
Hmm.
then, have been arrested 11 times is, and the arrest process is being processed is just, it's brutal. You're dragged around in chains, and I mean, strip searched, and I'm sure there's people that would be really happy to hear that was their intent. um but family court, in my opinion, is really sort of like the survival of the fittest.
Hmm. Hmm. It needs to be abolished.
It needs to be completely abolished. In the meantime, stay as far away from it as you can. Take your issues to the civil division, where you get a jury, and the
Hmm.
judge really just sort of, the judge can't make a decision about your guilt or innocence, and your defense. Anybody you name has to testify. I think you try to be open to sort of revolutionary ideas, like this mass writ of habeas corpus, which also isn't traditionally used to try to get custody back. But the traditional methods don't work. So what else
Yeah.
what else can we do, Marianne? I mean,
Uh,
you do this all the time. And it until, I don't know, they're really just going to have to get arrested, I think, until, and which is what is supposed to happen.
right.
That's how it's supposed to be. But until they do,
Hmm.
I still think that they will continue to run their business like the mafia. My ex told me, if not once, 1,000 times, he who has the gold makes the rules. And that is apparently true.
Oh, it is very true.
And, I really believed in the First Amendment. No, I didn't believe that he who has the gold make the rules would tip.
Right.
I was blindsided in a way that I cannot even explain. I mean, like, beyond blindsided. And every single time with the new charge, I was again equally blindsided, because he's never alleged to be the victim. It's never alleged that I contact him, that I have hurt him, that I have
Hmm.
threatened him, that I have emailed him. Nothing. It's always, it. And that's what I wanted to. Oh yeah, I think I said to include in the Domestic Violence Act that reporting child abuse is not an act of domestic violence. So that's one of the charges against me too. So I mean, how is reporting child abuse an act of domestic violence against somebody else, especially when it's medically substantiated?
Right. When there's evidence.
Evidence in the family court is ignored
Hmm.
and barred. Like I said, once I first produced the records showing that the final diagnosis was child abuse, then I was barred from the medical records. Why? Why would that happen? I mean, despite the lies and all the certifications, I have had my children at the same pediatrician for, even my oldest was there. She started
Mm.
there too. But I know he got kicked out with my two daughters from there. So now, they don't even have a primary care, to my knowledge,
Mm.
at this point. So it's just, I don't know how any of this can be happening in America.
No, I don't know either. I don't know. Someone had told me with this family court, it's all, well, we all know it's rigged. My case was rigged. And one of my friends said, it's not who you know, it's who you BLOW. And apparently the step monster was doing a lot of that.
Yes, a lot, which I also don't understand, because there's no reciprocity. Like, I'm happily married. We survive, and we get stronger every time we, go through the fire, and we talk about that. But I don't. There's no even like real estate available in my head for her on any sort of regular basis. So sometimes when I see things, people have forwarded me the Facebook posts and things that she had put up about me, I'm just appalled because I'm just thinking, wow. I mean, like we're not friendly, but the intensity, it's just sort of abnormal, especially since it's not reciprocal and there's no conflict or like ever has been. These are just things that happen that I don't even know about that like they're doing. Do you know?
Mhm.
So it's really
Oh.
that seems to be the connecting factor, really how and to your earlier question about how a father can do this to his own children's mother. I mean, how many pounds of flesh does somebody need? Really, 11 arrests. You know, I haven't seen my children.
Hmm.
2.5 years that my entire life has been ripped from me. Now just last week, he stole the federal tax return.
Oh.
When? How long will everybody let him abuse us before they stop? And the same for all the rest of victims in this situation. We just watch, like Virginia, Guffrey. We watch it happening, and we know. And why doesn't anybody stop it? It's such a loud, resounding message that they just don't value
No,
women and children. To me, I
no,
mean,
it needs to be abolished, solve a lot of problems.
yep. And in the
Oh,
meantime, like I said, use the civil court.
right,
Out,
right.
stay out of family court. At least you'll have a jury. I mean, it's a lot harder to buy a jury. Hopefully, I mean, than it
Hmm.
is. But I would say stay out. I don't think the answer is a better lawyer because the system is not designed to to even do what it's doing.
Hmm.
Making like these custody orders and things like that. They're exercising authority that was never conferred to them in anywhere in our law. The ALJs, I mean,
Right.
ripping children from their parents and ordering them into this and that, and I mean, it's just. I think the message that it sends though to the children that come forward. So as shocked as I was that they jailed me, I can't imagine what Lila feels like for having the bravery, and you can see she's terrified in the video. She keeps looking like as we're walking into the police station, and
Mhm.
it's 25 times in the hospital records, I'm not safe with my dad. And
Mhm.
the judge knew that, and it just feels so cruel. How can you do that to a child who is 12 years old and articulating this so crystal clearly for you? And my mom is safe, my mom loves me, I want to be
Mhm.
with my mom. When they ripped her off me, she had to be sedated almost into unconsciousness, it's called actually chemical restraint,
Mhm. Mhm.
and it's illegal,
Mhm.
especially when the answer was just to give her her mother. So
Mhm.
I mean, I just they just have to give us our children back. They just do. I don't know how that's going to happen, but I hope they know we're not going away until
Mhm.
they do.
I
I
think these kids should, when they hit 18, start suing.
They can sue earlier than that, actually.
Really.
That's part they can for sure, because who can tell my two children you don't have the right to your mom without you know and the evidence against my ex is, I mean, it's piles high. I have a text message printed from 2016. It's time, date stamped, everything, where he quite literally says, "Don't be surprised when child services shows up because I wouldn't agree to the proposed settlement at that time." I've been investigated 35 times since 2018. 35 times. Even my child with my current husband. No findings.
And
Now,
that's at the waste of taxpayer dollars.
35 times. Yep. You'd think that it would be obvious. They put me through all the drug and alcohol screening, never failed. I mean, I never have failed any of any of this.
Mm.
So, on these latest charges that really baffle me because I don't
Mhm.
understand what the legal standard is for a lawyer or a social worker to determine that a doctor's medical diagnosis is invalid, but that is what this charge is based on. Um, and so I've gotten 5 months time served, and the prosecutor will be arguing for 5 years of probation,
Mm.
which then puts you at risk nonstop for
Mhm.
additional, if they can get any charge on you, even if it's false, it's a violation of probation. And, now they keep using that too. So, if they keep successfully getting away with it, they could end up getting me, put in prison, all based on all the fraud that I, outlined here, which, as I had told you previously, I wouldn't really say anything that I couldn't support with documentary proof.
Mhm.
So I don't need any frivolous lawsuits about defamation or anything else. Anything that I've said um, can be supported by documents, videos,
Right.
medical records, etc., police reports.
And I'll keep you in my prayers. Is there anything else you'd like to add?
Um, no, I just think that parents should just really brace themselves.
Mm.
No, don't be blindsided because that handicaps me a little bit. You know what I
Mhm.
mean? You sort of have to be prepared and know what you're dealing with. And you know, I mean, the other thing I would say is stay open minded to and to this mass writ because of habeas corpus, because continuing to believe that just filing regular motions detailing your constitutional rights, it's futile. So,
Mhm.
but I would say that there's so many parents involved in this, and I tell people just keep screaming until they hear you. I mean, at your own risk, do so at your own risk, of course, because we know that they retaliate. But
Mhm.
really, every action taken against me has been retaliation. So he strangles the child according to a medical doctor,
Mhm.
and I do the time.
Oh, I'm so sorry.
So if he reports it, I do the time. If I report it, I do the time. He doesn't do the time despite the documented federal crimes. I mean, what else can we say at that point, Marion? What can we say?
Mhm.
That something is right, something is wrong.
Right. And how can people reach you if they have any questions?
On Facebook, I mean, all of my devices are compromised. I'm finding that's a lot more common too. I've been dealing with this since 2019, but more and more moms are having the same issue. I mean, they're having to flee the state. It's,
Yeah.
if I could, I would, you
Mhm.
know,
Mhm. Oh,
so,
I wanted to.
right? I mean, definitely, I would,
Mhm.
so I would, yeah, anybody, can reach me on Facebook. I'm in that one group a lot, sort of working on that right now, and working on Lila's law to
Mhm.
set the parameters around false allegations of domestic violence and make it safer for parents and children to report child abuse. I mean, it's very real, you know.
Mhm. Mhm.
So
Well, I'm so glad you came on to speak out. That takes a lot of courage and bravery after everything you've been put through.
it does, and I weigh my words really carefully
Mhm.
to make sure they don't twist them up into some sort of new charge. That's what I was saying, where there's a strong likelihood he'll try to go and say that me speaking about this and everything else has irritated him, and
Mhm.
now he's feeling harassed, and so therefore I violated the restraining order, when in fact I am not barred from speaking publicly about this on any podcast or anything else. But that's how it works. So
Yeah.
thank you
Well,
so much for
well,
having
thank you.
me.
Don't jump off, okay?
Okay.
Slam the Gavel's a podcast to help the public understand what really goes on in these courtrooms and jails. I am your host, Marianne Petrie. You can find me on Spotify, YouTube. Please like and subscribe, Apple iTunes, iHeartRadio, Google, other platforms. Again, feel free to buy me a coffee to help keep this podcast going. Thank you so much, Monica Ciardi, for all this insight and sharing your story. Thank you so very, very much.
Thank you for bearing witness and listening to and putting it out there.
Mhm.